Hi, good morning, everybody. Today's lesson is going to be about something that we call macromolecules. And I apologize if this is a lot of information at once. It is kind of tricky to fit everything into one summer, so I'm going to do the notes along with you guys today. So we've already talked about the digestive system and the circulatory system, and this kind of ties in with that. So there's 4 types of macromolecules that you guys have here. There's carbohydrates, there's lipids, there's proteins, and there's nucleic acids. You might have heard of some of those words before. And all of these things you get from your food. So this kind of relates to the digestive system in that way. But we're going to start talking about what is actually in that food that you're digesting and what do those things actually do. So we're going to focus on each one individually. We're going to learn about what elements are in that type of molecule, what that molecule does in your body, some examples of where you've seen that. So we're going to start out with carbohydrates or carbs. You've probably heard people talking about carbs or a low carb diet, or maybe eating lots of carbs before you do sports. We're going to learn about what carbohydrates actually are to start out. All right, so when we're talking about carbohydrates, we're really just talking about sugar. All right, carbs or carbohydrates is just another fancy way of saying sugar. And when we're talking about elements that are in carbohydrates, it's carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And we're going to see those 3 elements come up a lot. So on our first law on our notes for elements, it's going to be carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. All right. What's more important than what they're made of is more of what it does. That's kind of what we're going to be focusing on for our course this summer. And carbohydrates primarily are helping you with short-term energy. So they're giving you energy that's really fast. They're giving you energy that you're probably using in that one day. So if you're in sports, particularly in things like track or soccer, sometimes you might be told to eat a lot of pasta or bread the night before a race or a game to get more short-term energy. All right, so main thing that carbohydrates do, give you energy, quick energy. We're going to learn about some other things that may give you long-term energy that you can store for later. But carbohydrates, that energy is usually used up pretty quick. You're using it right away. Some examples of carbohydrates are in a lot of foods that you would think of. Anything that comes from a plant is going to have carbohydrates. So any kinds of fruits and vegetables have carbohydrates in them. And if you think about things that are made from plants like bread and pasta, those all have carbohydrates as well. All right, and you can usually tell if things have carbohydrates by looking at a label on your food, but there are also some particular carbohydrates that you might talk about. One of the readings today is going to be about glucose. If you ever see an ingredients list where things have those letters O, S, E at the end, that's a really easy way to tell that something has carbohydrates in it. So we're going to learn about glucose today. You might have heard of lactose, which is the sugar that's in milk. Some people might be lactose intolerant. All right, so those are some examples as well. But anything that has those letters O, S, E at the end would be a carbohydrate. All right, so big takeaways from carbohydrates. You get them from plants. They give you quick energy. All right, our next one is going to be lipids. All right, you might not have heard the word lipid before, but you probably have heard the word fat or fats. So lipids are just another scientific way of saying fats. All right, and that comes in a lot of different forms. And it's made of the exact same stuff that carbohydrates are made of. So it's made of the same thing. They might just look a little bit differently, but they're still made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. All right, they're made of the same things as carbohydrates, but their jobs might be a little bit different. All right, and lipids can actually do a lot of different things. They give long-term energy. All right, so any fat that you have on your body, that's just energy that your body is storing that you could use later if you needed it. All right. They also are involved in every single one of your cells. We're going to do a little bit about cells tomorrow, but that's about it. But they're making the outside of the cells. They're also really good at waterproofing. So if you want to try an experiment, you can always pour cooking oil or olive oil in like a glass of water. And you can try it at home if you want to, but try as hard as you want to stir them together, but they're never ever going to mix. So they don't mix with water. All right, but the two that we're going to write down, it gives you stores energy for later. All right, and it makes the outside of cells. So you are made of trillions of cells, and each one of them has a whole layer of fat on the outside of lipids. All right. In terms of examples, you probably have already guessed we eat a lot of foods that have fats in them. Oops. But examples would be something like nuts, olive oil, if you eat fatty meat. Those are all places where you can get lipids. Anything like that. Those can all give you lipids. All right. So we're halfway done. Our next part that we're going to talk about are proteins. You probably have heard a lot about eating protein. All right, I have a brother who is really into like going to the gym and getting really strong, and he is always making protein drinks and eating a lot of protein. So if you're anything like my brother, you probably think about proteins a lot. All right, proteins are a little bit different. They are made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. But at this point, we're going to add a new element, which is nitrogen. All right, so when we're talking about proteins, we're adding a new element, right? It's different because we've added nitrogen into this. We're going to be talking about proteins a lot in this class. A lot of the things that we're going to do next week are going to have to do with proteins. All right, proteins are made of these really big chains of things called amino acids. We're going to be learning about those chains next week. But these big chains of proteins can fold into lots of different shapes. And because of that, proteins can do a lot of different jobs. There's not really just one job for proteins because they can be so different. But there are a couple of things that we can kind of categorize proteins as doing. One is they provide structure, thinking about in your skin and in your muscles. That's why if you're like my brother and you're trying to get super jacked, you're going to want to eat a lot of protein. It gives you that structure in your muscles. But it also helps you do all of the chemical reactions in your body. So if you think about chemical reactions that are happening in your brain or in your digestive system, those are all done by proteins. And we're going to talk more about those next week. All right, so we're going to write just those two functions down. Okay, we're going to write down that it provides structure. Right? And we're also going to say that it helps chemical reactions. And we'll learn about some of those chemical reactions later. All right. For our example, of these things, you get in a lot of meat. If you're vegetarian, you might be eating beans and nuts instead to try and get more protein. But just like how we had that secret OSE ending to carbohydrates, you can actually look at the ending of protein words, and if they say ACE, you can tell that's a protein. So we're going to write a couple of things. One is I want to write down that word amino acids. Maybe we're going to write that proteins are made of amino acids. All right. But we're going to write down some examples too, right? Meat, nuts, beans, things that you eat that have proteins in them. All right, and I know I've been talking a lot today. Hopefully tomorrow it won't be as much. All right, but we are on our last one. So we've learned about three things. We've learned about short, quick energy and carbohydrates. right? Long stored energy and fats. Think about like bears hibernating, how if you ever look at like, I don't know, I really like nature documentaries, but if you ever watch one, they'll show animals getting super, super fat before the winter, right? And the reason that those animals like bears and squirrels and things get super fat is they're storing energy so that they can live through the winter and keep that energy for when it's harder to find food. Also, proteins helping chemical reactions, adding important structure to your body. And the last thing we're going to talk about is nucleic acids. Just like proteins, we're going to talk about nucleic acids as well next week. So that's kind of where we're headed, is talking about these two concepts, kind of where we're going to go in this class. And nucleic acids are the most complex of these four. They're made of the most stuff. They're made of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. They also have nitrogen, just like proteins. But we're going to add one more, which is phosphorus. And we'll care more about what they're made of next week. All right. When you hear about nucleic acids, what we're really talking about is DNA and RNA. And you probably remember that from taking biology in the past. I'm just going to jump ahead here and write those as our examples. All right. Nucleic acids, our examples are DNA and RNA. The NA at the end of those words actually stands for nucleic acid. So that's kind of my way to remember. And if you think about what you might already know about DNA and RNA, they do a couple of things. One is it stores genetic information. And that's what we're going to start caring about next week. And when we say that it's storing genetic information, what we really mean is it stores all the information of what makes you, you. And you can think about this in any living thing, right? Plants also have DNA. But in your DNA in your body, it has information about what your eye color is, what your hair is like, how tall you are, if you're more or less likely to get certain diseases. Those are all things that are in your DNA. So it stores genetic information. The second thing that nucleic acids do that maybe not as many people think about would be that it makes proteins. So you actually get these proteins that are doing all of these jobs from your DNA and your RNA. Your DNA has the instructions on how to make those proteins, and we're going to practice that next week. All right, I know that was a lot of notes. That's why we wrote them down. I don't expect you guys to memorize it, all right? I expect you guys just hold on to your notes so you can use them another time. We're really going to focus on these two columns next week. So my goal for today is we're learning a little bit more about carbohydrates and lipids. So that's kind of our focus on the rest of what you're going to work on today. So you guys are going to watch one more video about fat or lipids. All right. These answers are really up to you. What are 3 things that you learned from the video? What are 2 questions you have from the video? All right, so that's really up to you. Everybody's answers are going to look different. And then for learning about carbohydrates and sugars, you guys are going to do a short reading. It's less than a page about glucose and diabetes. So in all likelihood, you or maybe somebody that you know has diabetes. I know plenty of people in my family who have it. And we're going to learn about what that is and how that's related to sugars or carbohydrates. Then you're going to read the 1 page and answer 4 questions. All right, but that's it for today. You're just going to watch that short video about fat and lipids, and then you're going to read about sugar, and then you're all set. All right. Please let me know if you guys have any questions. I'll be on my computer at the usual times, and I'll be available to Skype on Teams as well if you need me.